President Trump's tweets attacking four Democratic congressmen, uniting the party in condemnation, which could play right into the president's hands. My next guest telling the Washington Examiner, quote, "It is useful to remember Trump doesn't play tic-tac-toe, he plays chess. And he's very often setting up a much deeper fight than you might think. He wants the Democratic Party to identify with them. I think the president is often inartful, but remarkably effective." Newt Gingrich is the former Speaker of the House, a Fox News contributor and host of the podcast Newt's World. He joins us now. Mr. Speaker, good morning to you. Well, tell us, what is your thinking on this? You're making the case that this was very purposeful on the part of the president, and it's all playing into his hand.
Well, I think the president's making two different strategic steps here. One is he wants to make sure that the Democrats embrace the radical wing of their party, and Speaker Pelosi was trying very hard to separate them, and now they've been driven back together, and it's going to be pretty hard not to believe that they're all on the same team. And the president believes that the more radical the Democratic Party is, the more likely it is that we're going to end up with Kevin McCarthy as the next Speaker of the House, because they're marginal Democrats. If they get identified with these radicals, they're just going to lose. And I think in that sense, if you watched the debate yesterday and the vote last night, the president successfully reunified the Democrats around the radicals. Second, I think a major thematic next year, much as it was in 1984 with President Reagan, is going to be patriotism. And every time the president says patriotism, the left-wing media, the propaganda wing of the Democratic Party, yells racism. I mean, the number of times the various left-wing media were using the word racist or racism this week is amazing. And the question is, does the average American think, for example, if you object to 1,000 people attacking a federal building in Colorado, tearing down the American flag, defacing it, hanging it up upside down and putting next to it a Mexican flag, if you object to that, are you a patriot or are you a racist? And the left will scream racism, but the rest of the country is going to think, you know, that stuff's crazy, and that as a patriot, I deeply oppose that. So I think the president's setting up a big national debate next year over the nature of patriotism and whether or not you're allowed to have free speech if you're a conservative, not just if you're a radical.
Well, when it comes to this most recent instance pertaining to the president's tweet, I guess it depends on who you ask, because Hakeem Jeffries was on this morning making the point that from his position, this disdain on the left for President Trump is a unifying force for the Democratic Party. Here's Hakeem Jeffries.
The progressives are not the problem. The New Dems are not the problem. The Blue Dogs are not the problem. The birther-in-chief is the problem. That's a unifying theme, not just for the House Democratic Caucus, but for the nation, because the existential threat to our democracy, to our way of life, to our values is so severe.
He's making the case, obviously, that this could unify his party.
I think it will unify his party, just as the other night you had all 10 candidates in the debate raise their hand over things like open borders and Medicare for all and so forth. There's no question in my mind the Democratic Party is going to be remarkably unified, but it's going to be remarkably left-wing. You know, in 1972, when they nominated George McGovern, he was seen by almost everybody as so radical that the rest of the Democrats could say, not me. Well, what's happening now is just the opposite. They're all the same person. It doesn't matter whether they nominate Biden or Kamala Harris or Bernie Sanders or Senator Elizabeth Warren. They're all the same left-wing, hardline, fringe politicians. So they're going to be very unified. They're going to get 40% of the vote under any circumstance, and they're going to have huge enthusiasm. Well, but they may, in the process, scare away most Americans.
The president's got a rally later today. You think he doubles down on this? You think he owns it?
Probably. I mean, look, the president believes if the issue is, do you think people who are hardline left-wingers, people who can't even tell the truth about the Holocaust, people who can't tell the truth about 9/11, people who lie about the border, which clearly AOC did, if you think that's appropriate, then you ought to be a left-wing Democrat. But if you think America is a country worth defending, if you think our border is worth defending, if you think we have a right as Americans to expect the rule of law, then you're going to end up being with Trump. I think that's his basic thematic from now to Election Day, that you have these two choices,
well,
a hard left choice and the rest of us.
He'll be rallying later today. We'll see what he says. Former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, always good to talk to you, sir. Thank you.